People think crying easily is a sign of weakness. But if you look at what's actually happening in someone's nervous system when they tear up at a commercial or get emotional in a conversation, the story is different from what most of us were told growing up. Let me start with something that probably happened to you. Someone told you to stop crying. You were probably young. Maybe you scraped your knee. Maybe someone said something that landed wrong. Or maybe you just felt something deeply and didn't know how to hold it inside. And the response you got was some version of, "Stop, be strong, don't cry." That message didn't just disappear, it got wired in. From a very early age, most people learn that visible emotion is a liability, that keeping it together matters more than acknowledging what you're actually feeling. Boys especially hear it loud. Boys don't cry, but girls aren't immune to the same message, just framed differently. Either way, the lesson is, emotions are inconvenient. Tears are weakness. So what happens to the kids who couldn't stop? The ones who felt things so intensely that tears came whether they wanted them or not. They learn to hide it. Or they spend their lives being told they're too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But here's what's actually happening inside a nervous system like that. Some people's brains genuinely process emotional information more deeply than average. It's not a character flaw. It's a trait. A measurable difference in how certain nervous systems respond to the world. Research suggests this applies to somewhere around 15 to 20% of the population. These aren't fragile people. They just feel things at a different level. Here's the key thing. Not all brains respond to emotion the same way. For most people, watching a touching moment, hearing a sad song, seeing someone in pain, it registers. But it doesn't overwhelm. The emotion comes in, gets processed, and fades relatively quickly. For someone who cries easily, that same moment hits differently, harder, longer, more completely. Their nervous system picks it up at a higher resolution. That's why a person like this might tear up at a movie scene that leaves everyone else completely unmoved. Why a piece of music can physically stop them mid-stride. Why a small act of kindness, a stranger holding a door, a friend remembering something they mentioned months ago, can bring tears in seconds. It's not performance. It's not manipulation. It's their nervous system doing what it was built to do. Here's the part that gets interesting. These people notice things others miss. The slight tension in someone's voice. The forced smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The moment a room shifts in energy before anyone else feels it. They read emotional subtext the way others read text on a page. Automatically, involuntarily, constantly. So when they cry, they're not losing control. They're responding to something real that most people in the room haven't even registered yet. But there's something most people don't understand about people who cry easily. When they're crying, it's often not their own pain they're experiencing. It's someone else's. There's a specific moment that people like this know intimately, when they watch someone else suffer and feel it as if it's happening to them. Not metaphorically. Physically. A tightness in the chest. A lump in the throat. Eyes that fill before they've made any conscious decision to feel anything. Psychologists call this empathic resonance. It's when you don't just understand another person's emotional state. You mirror it internally. And in some people, that mirroring runs deep. Seeing a stranger cry in public. Watching a news story about loss. Sitting across from a friend who's trying to hold it together. For someone like this, these aren't abstract situations. They're experiences that land inside them fully and immediately. And here's what nobody talks about. This is exhausting. They're not just managing their own emotional life. They're absorbing pieces of everyone else's too. That's why they often feel drained after social situations that others find energizing. They weren't just present in the room. They were tuned into every undercurrent of emotion flowing through it. Their tears in these moments aren't self-pity. They're not weakness. They're a direct response to someone else's reality, a signal that they were paying attention at a level most people never reach. But here's the thing about emotional sensitivity. It doesn't work the way most people think it does. Most people feel something, process it, and move forward. The emotion rises, peaks, and dissipates. Maybe within hours, maybe within a day. For people who cry easily, that's rarely how it works. They go home and replay the conversation. They lie awake thinking about the look on someone's face. They revisit a moment from years ago and feel a version of that original emotion wash over them all over again. Not because they're being dramatic, but because their minds haven't fully let it go. This is called emotional rumination. And in people like this, it's not a choice, it's almost a reflex. What people misunderstand is they assume these people feel more emotions than others. That's not quite right. What's closer to the truth is they feel emotions for longer. The signal lingers. The processing runs deeper. And because of that, they often arrive at insights about situations and people that others who moved on more quickly never reach. There's a reason many of history's most profound thinkers, artists, and writers described themselves as deeply sensitive people. The same trait that made them cry at things others shrugged off also made them see further into human experience than most people cared to look. Emotional depth is not comfortable, but it is generative. The person who carries emotional weight longer isn't failing. They're integrating. They're making meaning out of pain. But the body still needs release. And here's something science discovered that's interesting. Emotional tears, not the tears your eyes produce to stay lubricated, but the ones connected to feeling, contain measurably different chemical compositions. They carry elevated levels of stress hormones. In other words, crying may be one of the ways the body physically expels the biochemical residue of emotional stress. After a genuine cry, many people report a distinct shift, a sense of release. Pressure lifted, something settling that had been wound tight. That's not coincidence. That may be the nervous system completing a cycle it needed to finish. For people who cry easily, this process is more frequent. Not as a sign of instability, but as a form of maintenance. A pressure cooker with a properly functioning release valve is safer than one that's been sealed shut. The person who cries when they need to isn't breaking down. They're regulating. Tears are not always signs of falling apart. Sometimes they're signs that the mind is actively working to restore itself. And when you understand that, when you see tears not as failure but as function, the whole picture of what it means to cry easily begins to shift. Here's what often gets overlooked. People who cry easily tend to be among the most compassionate individuals in any room. They don't have to work to care. They already do. Deeply. Consistently. Often at their own expense. They're typically better listeners. Not because they've trained themselves to be, but because they're genuinely present to what another person is experiencing. They pick up on what isn't being said. They notice the emotional truth beneath the surface. They tend to have higher levels of emotional self-awareness. They know what they're feeling. They've spent years learning how to articulate it because they had to, just to manage their own inner world. And they possess something increasingly rare, a real unguarded connection to human experience. They haven't numbed out. They haven't armored over. They're still permeable to the full range of what life feels like, the beauty, the grief, the unexpected tenderness of ordinary moments. That isn't weakness wearing the wrong label. That's just what it looks like when someone hasn't traded their sensitivity for social approval. So here's the question worth sitting with. What if the strongest person in the room isn't the one who never flinches? The one who keeps a stone face? The one who's mastered the performance of being unmoved? What if the strongest person in the room is the one who still allows themselves to feel it, who hasn't numbed out, who knows the weight of their own sensitivity and carries it anyway? What if feeling deeply isn't the opposite of strength? What if it is the strength? People who cry easily have been misread for most of their lives, labeled as fragile, told to toughen up, made to feel like something about them needs fixing. But the actual experience is different. They feel deeply, sometimes their own emotions, often other people's. They notice what others miss. They understand in ways that run deeper than words. That's not something to hide. That's just something to understand.